Welcome to In the Loop with Peter McGinn, Wilmington's new Assistant Superintendent. In the Loop is a monthly video magazine brought to you by the Wilmington Superintendent of Schools. Peter will offer Wilmington residents a closer look at school business and respond directly to email questions, concerns, ideas, and suggestions. And now, here's Peter.
Welcome to the second installment of In the Loop. My name is Peter McGinn, Wilmington's Assistant Superintendent of Schools. In the Loop is a program designed to provide information about Wilmington schools. In this episode of In the Loop, you'll learn about a rather unique program that allows Wilmington teachers to pursue their passions. Teachers are allowed to travel to distant locations for the purpose of enhancing their knowledge and their instruction, resulting in enriched student learning. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Joanne Benton, Wilmington's Superintendent of Schools. Thank you for being with us this evening, Mrs. Benton. I'd like, if you would, to explain to our audience a little bit about the program and where the teachers have traveled to in the recent past.
My pleasure, Peter. Thank you for having me on the show. Fun for Teachers came about 3 years ago when actually we literally received an email from an organization down in Texas who had grant applications asking schools who are interested in supporting professional development for teachers during the summer. And the criteria was that it had to be during the summer so that teachers were not taking off from the school year and you had to pay for substitutes. To make a long story short, we applied for the grant and we received it, and we were able to offer opportunities to 2 teachers in the Wilmington Public Schools to really dream about a place they'd like to travel or a project they wanted to do that they just could not fund on their own. Set up an application process. In the first year, 2 Fund for Teacher awards were granted to high school, one to the high school music teacher, Jason Luciana, who spent the summer studying music and culture in Ireland, and a second grade teacher over at Woburn Street School who traveled to Iceland to study pufflings, which actually ties in beautifully with our second grade curriculum.
Great. Why do you support the program?
I support the program because I think part of our job is to feed the teachers. We need to nurture our classroom teachers and provide them with opportunities to do something connected to their work that's going to excite them and make them want to come back to school and not necessarily teach what they've learned over the summer to their students, but have a fresh view of standing in front of the classroom. From my perspective, the 4 grants we've awarded so far have all been related to the curriculum. This past year, Kristen Taza traveled to the Rocky Mountains, and we had
The Grand Canyon, I believe, right?
Grand Canyon, yeah. And Tracy Kaysen high school teacher went to Alaska. She's writing a new course on religion in our history, and so I believe that we've been able to be rewarded by having teachers that are doing things that stimulate their yearning for lifelong learning, and also it's translated into the classroom.
So you think that it does have an effect on the student learning?
Absolutely.
It enriches the student
Absolutely.
learning? Okay. Tell me, is this a program that will continue? Are we planning to do this year?
We are very fortunate to have the Wilmington Education Foundation, who has taken over this Fund for Teachers, and they will continue to support our efforts. The application process is such that it will be going out. I use it as I label the email that goes out Valentine to our staff. It will go out on February 14th, inviting teachers to think about, dream about a place that they would like to visit or a project they'd like to do over the summer. And the application process is not complicated. They have to connect it to what they're doing in the classroom, and
Great.
I encourage everyone to apply.
So it looks like we'll have 2 more Wilmington educators going off on an adventure.
Yes.
and bringing back stuff to their classroom in the fall. That's wonderful. I have the pleasure of sitting here with Blake Siskevich. Blake is a music teacher in the Wilmington Public Schools. He serves the children at the Boutwell School and also the West Intermediate School. Blake is also, in his spare time, a member of the Tanglewood Festival Chorus. Is that correct, Blake?
Yep.
And as a member of the chorus, Blake had the wonderful experience of traveling with the BSO to Europe last year. And when I heard about Blake's trip, I was very interested in knowing how that trip has affected his teaching and what it's meant for his students. So I'm very happy to have Blake here today with me and have the opportunity to share his story with the Wilmington public. Blake, tell us a little bit about the trip initially and what it was like, where you went, and I'm sure people would be very interested with that.
Absolutely. So I was asked to go last April, and Joanne Benton was the assistant superintendent in your position at that time, and I went to her and asked permission ahead of time. And the trip happened in August and September, the first 2 weeks of school opening. So I got permission to use it as professional development because I was a music teacher in Wilmington, and this was a music trip based with the BSO. We traveled to Switzerland, Germany, London, and France, Paris, France. And we also did a stop off in Belgium. So it was 5 countries, 6 cities over a 2-week span. Singing in 5 out of the 6 cities. Our longest stay was in Germany, and we sang the same concert. It was Berlioz' Damnation of Faust. It's about an hour-and-a-half work. With the BSO, we had soloists that traveled with us, singing in all these different venues for the 2 weeks.
Okay. So the festival chorus, Tanglewood Festival Chorus, was accompanying the BSO on this tour. When you approached the superintendent, or at the time, the assistant superintendent, is that correct?
Yep.
What was her reaction to your request?
It was something that she was extremely supportive in. Number one, it was fully funded by the BSO, so it didn't cost the Wilmington public absolutely anything, just the time away from school for me. She was extremely supportive. Joanna has always been supportive of the arts, which we're very grateful for. She was more than happy once she stepped into a role of superintendent to continue with that support and sign me off to go for the 2 weeks.
And I'm sure, and this is what I'd like to have you talk about a little bit, I'm sure the superintendent or the assistant superintendent at the time recognized that in this way, this was, you not being here certainly was something that she had to approve, and the students would not have their primary music teacher for those 2 weeks, but probably recognized it as an opportunity for you to go enrich your musical talents, which you then could bring back to the classroom for the Wilmington students. Can you tell me how the trip has impacted your instruction, and what do you think the payoff has been for the students in your classrooms?
It absolutely has affected the way things happen in the classroom. I think just the opportunity to go over, and as a classical musician myself, seeing hundreds and hundreds of years of tradition in classical music over there and walking into these mammoth places, you know, churches and things like that, and just the venues that they have over there that they perform in, and the culture that revolves around classical music. How people dress when they come to a concert is very different. The type of crowd is very different. When we sing in Symphony Hall, it's a much more mature, older generation crowd. And when kids or younger generations come, they're not dressed as appropriately as they should be for a venue like that.
Respectful, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. In Europe, wherever you went, it was it was to the nines. You dressed up, you were respectful. And in America, when a song is done and the concert's done, it's clap and get up and get to my car. There, they'd clap for 20, there were nights we'd stand for 25 minutes while the audience would clap for us, and just, they were very much more relaxed and in the moment and enjoying what was going on, and just such a sense of, appreciation for this type of culture, which of course, classical music has its roots in Europe. So I don't think America understands the depth of the culture of classical music, and how that has applied to my classroom. Currently, right now, I'm doing a unit on American pop music, and the last 100 years where it all came from, especially kicking off Black History Month, because the majority of our music today came from African American spirituals and songs from the plantations and all of that. And we've talked about the last 100 years. And during this unit, I've talked to the kids, and I said, when I was over in Europe, yes, we sang all these classical venues and we sang classical music in these beautiful churches, but you'd walk into a social establishment like a restaurant or something like that, even a mall, and they're playing American pop music. You know, our effect of that, you know, we have a huge effect on them. I said it's like listening to KISS 108 FM, except for when there's talking, it's all in French, you know. And they were blown away by that, and I'm like, we have a huge effect on Europe with American pop music. The classical music over here in the United States isn't as strong as, you know, it's not as strongly as affected as the amount of culture we push on to the rest of the world. So I think they were really, really intrigued that, wow, that we have such an effect on their culture.
What do you hope for those students to leave your classroom at the end of the year? What do you hope the 1, 2, or 3 most important things that came about as a result of your trip that they will have learned that perhaps youngsters in another school district did not?
Number one is respect at a concert. You know, in the classroom, we do a recorded curriculum, and I make all the kids, you know, they come up and they play in front of their class. How do you act when somebody else is performing? As a performer, how do you act when you're performing? As an audience member, how do you do that? The mutual respect that goes on. And different concerts have different, you know, obviously respect levels. If you're at an outdoor venue in a rock concert, you're gonna behave very differently than if you are at a classical concert in Symphony Hall. You know, and we just talk about that different. I think really kids aren't taught that etiquette now, and I think to focus on it as a music teacher is really great. That's the number one thing. The number two thing would be just having them have a much more sense of appreciation of 400 years of music. You know, back then, these were the hits of, you know, the 1400s. We talked about what ragtime was, and I said if you were riding on the Titanic before it sank, this is what you would be hearing people play when you're on the ship. You know, so you go with Carnival Cruise Lines now, and that's what you hear. But if you were on the Titanic, so they can relate to those kind of things. And now let's go back 400 years and talk about music in that time period. So just so they get more of a sense of what it is. You know, and just having a sense, number three, just a global community. You know, reality is these kids, when they get into their college age level, they're going to be dealing with a global community. You know, and the more you know about a culture, the more you can relate to them, and the better you're going to be able to deal with in the business world and all of those kind of world. You know, we need to prepare our kids to be ready for a global community.
Right, right. And there's such an emphasis on that, and it sounds exactly as you say, that to have a better sense of other cultures will allow one to be more successful and integrate in those cultures, whether it's in business or whatever endeavor one of the Wilmington students might be involved in later on in life, and have a better sense of the history of the European countries, their culture, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. I think that kids in America have a much harder time understanding. Our country is huge. It's a big country. We can travel 3,000 miles and still use the same money and speak the same language. But when we were in Switzerland, there's 5 different dialects. There's, you know, you've got German influence, French influence. So you can travel 100 miles and have people have a completely different dialect, and you have a hard time understanding them. But at the same time, they speak several different languages, because that's, you know, you travel 50 miles and you're in a different country, and they use different money, and they have a whole different set of rules, where we can travel a long distance. We lose that ability to find appreciation because everything is so similar. Even though we're a melting pot, you know, country, it's still so similar in our values and, you know, who we are as a country, where they have that access to go to a completely different country and have such a different culture, and they have to learn how to get along and respect each other.
Right, right. Blake, I understand that you were able to bring some slides of the trip to Europe, and also you have some tape of your instruction and student performance in your classroom?
Yeah, the tape that you're about to watch is a slideshow that I put together at home. It's basically monuments that the kids would maybe recognize about those different cities that we went to in Europe, and I added some maps so that they can see where it is in the world. And then I also showed the venues that we played at, and the fantastic concert halls, very modern concert halls, to the old Gothic churches that we performed in as well. And then you're also going to see some in-class demos of kids playing the recorder and how we set up that respect. The kids actually have to listen to the people coming up to play the recorder, because the kids do a self-evaluation on their own performance, and then the classroom as a whole will evaluate the child, based on, we do a scale of 1 to 5, and just how they have to listen and be an active listener rather than just, hum and listen to music. But these are the things you need to be listening for. Can you recognize the melody? Where are there places that this performer can make improvements? Where are spots that they did a really great job, and things like that. So teaching children respect and becoming an active listener and an active audience member.
Great.
And they turned it into a musical, and when the witch steps out on stage, actually everyone started clapping because they knew the character and all that. So it is appropriate at those times to clap. Now I'm going to show you some places that I went in Europe, and we're going to talk about classical music, a completely different style of music, and when is it appropriate to clap and when it is not. No, you'll be able to see. Okay. What I'm going to do, I'm going to get my remote so that I can pause it. So, I flew into a country right here called Switzerland, and we performed there. Yep. What continent is this? Sydney? Europe. Good. We performed in Switzerland, and then we came up to Germany. Oop. There we go. We came up to Germany. We performed 2 places in Germany. Then we came over here to a small country called Belgium. And we didn't perform there, but we stayed there. Then we came down to Paris, France. And then we took a train underneath the English Channel. There's a huge tunnel underneath the English Channel that goes from France to England. And we performed in London, England, and that's where we ended up, and then we flew back to Boston. What? Yes, Turkey is a country as well. This is the Tanglewood Festival Chorus. This is the name of the chorus that I sang with. All right, they're a professional organization, and they perform with the Boston Symphony. I'm going to show you some pictures of places that I went. See if you can guess. This is Switzerland. Our first stop, we stopped right here at Lucerne, right in the center of the country. These are the Swiss Alps. Anyone seen the Sound of Music? Yeah. The movie? Those are the mountains that they climbed at the end of the movie in the Swiss Alps. This is the first place. This is the concert hall. Yeah, pretty big, huh? A little bit bigger than our cafeteria. Yes, they could. It is actually a hotel, and it's 7,000 feet in the air. This is the one on top of one. This is called Pilatus, and if you can see the little cables, there was a cable car that you had to take up from the bottom of the mountain. And this is the Swiss Alps, 7,000 feet. As you can see, we're even with the clouds. I did take the cable car up to the top of the mountain. A little bit fun. I'm a little scared of heights, so it was a little nerve-wracking for me. Especially when the wind started blowing and the cable car started going back and forth. I was a little nervous. Then we went to Germany, First place we stopped was Essen, which is right here. And then we went into northern Germany to a place called Trier, which is actually not even on the map because it's a small town.
Hey, it's Neverland.
It kind of does look like Neverland, doesn't it? That's the Netherlands, not Neverland. Peter Pan. I gotcha. This is the place where we sang in Germany. Right here is a huge pipe organ in the back. We stood right there, and here's the stage. Was I in the front row? No, I was in right here in the second row in the middle. And this is actually the opera house. So they perform opera here. As you can see how modern it is, it's brand new. And in fact, this stage, the whole floor was put on hydraulics. Have you ever seen a car be put up on hydraulics? This whole floor raises up 20 feet so that you can make a flat stage out of it. So this will raise all the way up to here so you can make a flat stage out of it. The whole floor does. It was pretty cool.
Did they do it? Yeah.
And this is the Boston Symphony Orchestra when we rehearsed, and there would be the audience when they come to sit. All right, red velvet seats, very fancy place. Okay, Lawrence, what's up?
Thing in the background.
What's what thing in the background?
No, the one with the red velvet seats.
This?
Yeah.
Those are all the seats.
No, I mean like that white thing.
That was just somebody's bag. Come on. And then this is us. We sang. I'm standing right here. We performed. So this whole stage could lift all the way up here, be 20 feet high. Seats all the way around. It sat, I think, 6,000 people. So you could have 6,000 people, a little bit more than our cafeteria can hold, just slightly. All right. Yep. And there's Mr. S right there. Okay. Look at our dress. What are we wearing? Tuxedos. Okay. In classical music, when we performed in Europe, we had to wear tuxedos, and the girls had to wear long black dresses all the way down to their ankles. They couldn't show any of their legs. It's out of respect.
Which one did you wear?
I wore a tuxedo, Danny. All right. My dress was at the dry cleaners. This is the outside of the opera house that you just saw. It does kind of look like a school or a hotel.
It's a motel.
A little bit, yep. This is kind of like Cinderella's Kingdom, except for this is a little bit older. This is the oldest Gothic church in all of Europe. What? This is, you've been to this church in Cologne? All right. It took 600 years to build. All right. And in Germany, in the 1940s and 50s, what happened? Does anybody know? Go ahead, Sydney. Yeah, we had World War II. And what happened to a lot of places during that war? They got bombed. And this was one of the only churches in all of Germany to survive. All right, yep. So it survived through 2 world wars. It is absolutely huge. I did go inside it. In fact, I climbed all the way up here. You could climb into these bell towers and see. I think I put a picture on there. You could see the view. Yep. That's the window inside the church. Stained glass window. Yep. Very common. That was a form of artwork that they had all over Europe. This is the top of, this is a bell in the bell tower. There were 8 bells. And they would ring every hour, and you could go right up so you can see the people. You could go right up and go to the bell. I did. I took that picture.
Did you go up during the hour?
Did I go up during the hour? I did not stick around. You would have to plug your ears, though. It was quite loud. Daniel, is this an appropriate question?
Yeah.
Go.
Oh yeah. My great grandfather was in
Then there you go. That was appropriate. Here is a church that we sang in. Look how decorative it is. Yeah, it is extremely fancy. We don't have churches like that because how old is America? Is it as old as Europe? Okay. These churches are probably... Well, America was always here, but it was not discovered. This is the top of the church. Look at all the artwork. They made artwork out of everything. Okay, that's how they expressed. When you go, if you go to church, does your church have that kind of artwork? Maybe. All right. Most of them don't, because our churches are a lot younger. There's the organ. That's a pipe organ. It is a little bit big, huh? There's the ceiling of the church. See, they make artwork out of absolutely everything. So we're fancier. And I went to Paris, France. Paris is right here. Can you think of something famous in Paris, France? The Eiffel Tower.
Visited it. Mr. Eiffel visited it. I saw the picture. Mr. S. Did Mr. Eiffel invent the Eiffel Tower?
And there it is. So I went, they have elevator, well, you don't climb it, you can actually take an elevator. They have an elevator that goes to this platform and an elevator all the way up. And yes, I did go all the way up to the top and got quite a view of Paris, France. This is the rehearsal hall that we went to in Paris, France. Again, lots of different levels, balconies.
This looks like the one
It does look very similar, doesn't it?
Where's the nosebleed?
The nosebleeds would be up here at the top. And there, Mr. S is right here. We sat behind them. Here's the orchestra. That is one of the famous opera singers that sang with us. These two are the soloists. He was actually from Italy, and she was from Switzerland. And then if you look at how people are dressed. Very fancy. Not necessarily tuxedos, but what do they have? Suits. All right. When you listen to classical music and you go to a concert, you need to dress up. Remember how I always talked about when we do our concerts, what do we wear? We dress up. Okay? It's out of respect for the music and the culture. Everyone dressed up. The soloists wear either tuxedos or fancy dresses. Everyone dresses up, and they stand up and clap at the end. Dan T, what?
Did Mr. Eiffel invent the Eiffel Tower?
Did Mr. Eiffel invent the Eiffel Tower? I feel like that's a great thing for you to go on the internet and Google.
Those were your feelings. He did invent it. Yes, I did.
That's a wonderful thing for you to go on the internet. Anybody know what this is? You should know it from a Disney movie. What do you think, Kevin?
It's the actually get but my kids do it.
Okay. David, what do you think?
Disneyland.
It's not Disneyland.
Forget what it's called.
Ah, the Hunchback of Notre Dame lives here. Absolutely. This is the Notre Dame Cathedral. Have you ever seen the movie The Hunchback of Notre Dame? This is the cathedral he lives in. It was in Paris, France. Those are the bell towers. All right, a very famous French cathedral. And you can go inside it. I did go inside it. It's huge. I didn't see the Hunchback. I think he was, he had that day off.
Or it was
He was sleeping. That's the inside of the Notre Dame Cathedral. You can see how tall the ceilings are. And there is not any artwork or painting on the top. It's all stone. So it's a little bit different. Then we ended up underneath, took the train to London. And the trains, they have high-speed trains that go over 100 miles an hour. You go all the way under the English Channel. They dug a tunnel.
About how long did it take me to get to London?
From Paris to London on a high-speed train, it was only an hour, a little over an hour.
Wow, that's pretty fast.
It is pretty fast. It tops out at about 120 miles an hour.
Wow.
So, and then we were in the tunnel for maybe 15 minutes. So, anybody know what this is in London, England? It is a building. It's a very famous building.
It's where the Queen lives.
It's where the Queen lives. It's the Royal Palace. Do you know the name of the palace? Starts with a B.
The Buckingham
The Buckingham Palace, absolutely. And you can actually, she was on vacation. She was at her summer home because this was over the summer. And you can take a tour all through her palace. And we got to go through her palace and see a lot of the rooms that they have there. You cannot take pictures inside the palace. Why can't you? For protection of the preservation of the palace. So you can go in and see it, but you cannot take pictures. They have guards all over. And it was the 60th wedding anniversary of the Queen. So they had a huge thing. They had her wedding dress out and the ring that they had given it and all that. Do you know what this building is? The clock tower. It's a famous one. No, it's still in London.
Big Ben?
It's Big Ben. This is the Big Ben clock. And this is Parliament. This is their government building. Right in the center of downtown. I'm actually standing on a bridge and there's water running underneath. But that's right in the center of downtown. Big Ben is the famous clock tower. And I do believe that that is the end. Oh, this is where we sang, the round building called the BBC Proms. That's a theater. It's completely round. So when you walk in, seats are all around you. People were sitting behind us. And I think I have a picture, and then that is the last. That's the inside. It's not a very good picture, but see how it's round? And that was us sitting in the BBC Proms in the Round Theater. The orchestra sits here. People stood up on their feet for 3 hours to see the concert. So we sold out. So there's a great respect for classical music. There's the other picture and the menu. All right. Why do you think people clap at the end of a concert? To be respectful. Absolutely, to be respectful. Okay? Because when you have lots of performers on the stage, you as an audience member, are you going to be able to go up and shake their hand and say thank you for performing and for your talent? No. Okay? So you get to clap for them. Why do people bow on stage? What does the bow mean? Does anybody know? What do you think, Stephen? Thank you for your respect. Absolutely. Okay? So let's take out our recorders and we're going to practice that clapping and bowing thing right now. Let's warm up, please, with our purple belt. So find Old MacDonald. All right. If you don't have your paper, please find someone that has one. Remember to play musically, softly. 1, 2, ready, play. Can you play softer than that? Six fingers, second line. See if you can play softer than that. That's better. Six fingers, 5 fingers, 6 fingers, B, 2 fingers, 3 fingers. Nice job. And is there anybody who has... Now this is the part that we need to talk about. What do you need to do as an audience member? Show me. What do you need to do? Be respectful, all right? So let's see if that back table can join us in being respectful. Louis, help us out, buddy. Okay, good. What are we going to do at the end when he's done performing? What is Kevin going to do at the end? One, two, ready, play. 6 fingers, 3, 6 fingers, 3 fingers, stay on G. 6 fingers, 5 fingers, 6 fingers. Very nice. Good. All right, Kevin, what do you think?
4.
He gives himself a 4 out of 5. Audience? All right, I see some 3s, I see some 4s. I'd give him about a 4.5. Do you know where you had the hardest time?
Yeah.
Where?
Right here.
These, 6
Yeah.
fingers and 5 fingers.
Yeah.
All right, nice job, you may on the board. All right, anybody else for that one? Let's move on to When the Saints then, please. Okay, let's play it together as a group. When you're ready, play a B. When you're ready, play a soft B. There it is. How about A, G, back to A, back to A. There it is, up to B. Do you remember C? And softly play D. Just your second finger, no thumb. And stop. Good. It's a pretty good sound. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, ready, play. 2, 3, 4, 1. 2, 3, 4, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. A, G, G, B. Look at your paper. Bum, bum. G, A, G, and stop.
It's my pleasure to introduce to you Kristen Taza, grade 2 teacher at the Woburn Street School. Kristen has taught in the Wilmington schools for 11 years, and Kristen was one of the very fortunate teachers to take advantage of the Wilmington Educational Foundation's Fund for Teachers grant. And I welcome Kristen to our show of In the Loop. Nice to have you here, Kristen.
Thank you.
Very excited to have you here to learn more about your trip and how it's affected your teaching and how the youngsters, how their learning has been enriched. So why don't you begin by telling the audience about how you came to find out about the grant opportunity.
Okay, last year I received an email from the Funds for Teachers through the Wilmington Public Schools, and it stated that you could apply for a grant for the summer to travel. And so I started to go through my curriculum and thought, what best opportunity would I give the students of Wilmington Public Schools and the community? And I came up with an idea across curriculum. It reaches every subject area: math, reading, social studies, and science. And I traveled to the Grand Canyon in Arizona. And it was a wonderful trip. And it links to my curriculum in reading because I teach a unit on nature walk and another unit on amazing animals. And I got the initial idea because we talk about Theodore Roosevelt, and he was known as our nature president. And a lot of people don't know that, but he basically saved the Grand Canyon. He had a lot of action in making it a national park. So he has a famous quote that he says, "Save it for your children's children and your children's children after that and thereafter." And a little bit more on the quote, but in 1908 he was giving a speech with that quote, and shortly thereafter it became a national park. So that really helped me with the overall goal for the grant. And then I thought about all the aspects of my curriculum. So those 2 units in reading, amazing animals, it allowed me to see many animals. I will say I thought I'd see more, but animals are smarter than humans, and they stay inside during the daylight, or out of, I shouldn't say inside, but in the shade. and as I was out traveling and walking and hiking, and so that was an opportunity. And I did take part in the Geology for Kids program, and I took part in their Junior Ranger Park program. I became a Junior Ranger, 14 and up Junior Ranger. And that entailed me following a ranger for the day. She took us on nature walks and fossil hunts and different things that I can share with the classroom. So that was another great opportunity that linked to the reading. For science, it was unbelievable how many fossils you can just see that are still there from when the Grand Canyon used to be a shallow ocean. And a lot of people think back to millions and millions of years ago and how it all evolved, and that was the initial goal. It was a shallow ocean, and a lot of the shell life and the animals that would be in the ocean are there as fossils still there in the rock. That was amazing. For my math unit, it always goes along with our depth and our place value, that the Colorado River runs 277 miles long down the Grand Canyon, but it was only 10 miles across at the widest point and 1 mile down, so at the depth. So those are great things to bring into the classroom. And the social studies aspect was learning about other cultures, the Native Americans, the different people that traveled through the Grand Canyon. And a big aspect of that was how the Grand Canyon really didn't become a tourist attraction until about the last 100 years. And now 5 million people visit a year, whereas before, many, many travelers and many, many explorers came and said it was a wasted piece of land, and they really didn't appreciate it. And I think Theodore Roosevelt was really there to thank as our nature president to save it. And believe me, it was an unbelievable sight.
Very interesting.
So,
How much did you know about the Grand Canyon? Was that something that you had visited before, or that you had done a lot of reading about, or was this really your first experience in really looking at the Grand Canyon in depth?
well, growing up, I remember my father, no, I have never visited. I'll answer you that. But I remember my father talking about the Grand Canyon a lot and how it is definitely something you'd want to see because it's on our continental United States. It's one of our natural wonders, and it is one of the 7 natural wonders, and we're so fortunate to have it here in the United States. And I really didn't know a lot about it. I was on a tour with a gentleman, and he asked everybody on the tour bus, what state is the Grand Canyon in? And I said Arizona, and people were answering 4 or 5 states, and it really is only in Arizona, so there's so many people that even go that maybe don't even know a lot about it. Another thing is I learned so much. I bought so many books. I read a lot about now. I'm really intrigued with the people that had traveled there before, learning a lot about the geology, which I didn't know about before, and I was really, really inspired by that. You could just see the fossils everywhere and the views, and everywhere you went there was a different view. So I learned a lot, and it was a place I had never traveled to, so it was wonderful and beautiful.
So is it fair to say that prior to your being awarded this grant from the foundation, that the Grand Canyon really wasn't in your teaching repertoire?
Yes, it wasn't. And I said to myself, how can I link all of my areas of learning, not just one area? How can I bring it in to the classroom? So this year, I've set up a display in the classroom. We've already done a project through the whole 2nd grade, not just my classroom, the 7 classrooms at the Woburn Street School. We've created a bulletin board out in the lobby so people can learn about my trip, but also there's projects from the students. So if people stop by the Woburn Street School, they can see that. And they are just so excited about learning anything about the Grand Canyon, and it's exciting because none of my students have traveled there. So
tell me what from their reaction, what impresses them the most about the Grand Canyon? What do grade 2 students get struck by?
I think they get struck by mostly when I tell them that the Grand Canyon was made from many things. First, the shallow sea, earthquakes, thunderstorms, the upward carving of the Colorado River was mostly to say the making of the Grand Canyon. But for me to say that they're really not sure. They have all this research and they have all these different ways of saying that how it came about, but they're not 100% sure. Another thing that intrigues them is the size. And another thing is that when I say the Colorado River runs 277 miles down the length of the Grand Canyon, they are trying to picture this, but I try to tell them that anywhere you go on the Grand Canyon rim, you don't necessarily see the Colorado River. That's how massive it is. So I think the size.
How do you do that with grade 2 students? How do you try to convey a sense of 277 miles, the width of the canyon, as you said, and all of the data, or size, I guess is what I'm thinking about. How do you try to convey that to them so it has meaning?
Right, good question. 277 miles is a lot for a second grader. They're 7 turning 8. One boy said to me, would that be 11 laps in my pool? I said it would be a lot more than 11 laps in your pool. In gym class and physical education, they have to run a mile around the field. So I tried to relate it to that. If you did that, it's 277 miles, or I might say from here to your distance home. Might be 3 miles. Let's figure out how long the Colorado River is. Going through just the Grand Canyon, it's 277 miles. Starts in the Rockies, doesn't necessarily, that's not the length of the whole river. So that's really intriguing. And they always ask me, how far down? How far down? And I say it's a mile down, but that's if you take, a piece of yarn and drop it a mile down. Whereas when you have to hike down, which I was very fortunate to do, you are doing switchbacks all the way down. So you might walk more like 2, 3, 4, 5 miles down because you're walking back and forth. You can't walk straight down. And that to them is pretty interesting because they're thinking, wow, that's pretty steep. But when you show them a switchback on a photo, it's pretty exciting. So.
Just from talking to you and listening to you, this is now the second time that I've heard you talk about your trip, and I can see how excited you are about it still to this day. And my sense is that the Educational Foundation's grant to you really has enriched the teaching in your classroom, and my sense is that the students have had a different learning experience than they would have if you hadn't have traveled there. So I just wanted to thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
And I look forward to talking with you in the future about the trip, because I know you'll keep using it, and that's very exciting.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Hi. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Tracy Casson. Tracy is in the 7th year teaching at the high school. Tracy teaches in the social studies department. And I'd like to talk to Tracy about her experience with the Fund for Teachers grant that the Wilmington Educational Foundation sponsors. So, welcome, Tracy. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. As I mentioned with Kristen, this is the second time I've talked to you about this. I saw your presentation to the Educational Foundation Board and was very impressed with all that you gathered, all that you brought back, all of the information and beautiful photographs and artifacts. And perhaps you could start just by telling us what led you to apply for the grant. How did you find out about it? And then we'll go from there, okay?
Okay, well, the grant was open to all Wilmington teachers, and so we did receive an email about it with the stipulations that you had to write a proposal. And so immediately it was something that I was interested in because I had just got the approval for a new course, a new elective in the social studies department that I designed on world religions and cultures. And this was a course that would have no textbook. I was designing myself, and so I needed materials. And so I thought, well, this grant would provide me with a great opportunity to learn about a new culture. So I started there, and then when I started to do research, I thought, well, I really want to know the most I can about American culture. And that eventually led me to Alaska, the most remote part of the United States, and I thought, that culture is probably very different than the culture here in New England. So perhaps I could maybe travel there. And I ended up designing my own itinerary because what I wanted to do was so specific, and I wanted to make connections to as many courses in the social studies department, as well as the own course that I was designing, the world religions and cultures. So I started to do research and put together the proposal, making connections to our 9th grade U.S. History 1 course, our 10th grade U.S. History 2 course, the sociology course I teach, and then a major unit for my world religions and cultures class. So that's where I started.
And had you visited Alaska before?
No, but I had heard about how beautiful it was. And something that surprised me was how Alaska is during the summertime. It is absolutely gorgeous. And you have, well, during the winter, you have all these hours of darkness, you have all these hours of sunlight in the summer. And so this was a summer grant. So I thought, well, this is the perfect time to really go and visit this place. So I had wanted initially to go to Alaska just to see the beauty of Alaska. And it ended up coming together with this grant very well.
Great. Tell the audience a little bit about what impressed you the most, what you found most fascinating. Tell us about that.
Well, I began my trip in Fairbanks, and then I ended up taking a 12-hour train ride to Enrich. And right away, next to me on the plane, I was seated next to someone who was from an indigenous Alaskan culture. He was flying into Fairbanks, and then he was going to take a 2-hour little 2-seater plane to go to his community, which was located farther north along the coast. And this man was so generous and kind and shared so much with me about his own culture, his work. And so overall, I was probably most impressed with the people of Alaska and their willingness to share what their lifestyle is about. And it is very different than what life is like here in New England. But yet it also did help me appreciate what we do have here in New England as well, which we do have the summer and the winter, and we do have access to beautiful mountains with snow, and then beaches in the summertime. So it did help me to appreciate what we have here in New England, but also at the same time, the people of Alaska. Everybody I met was so wonderful. So I was definitely impressed with that and surprised. It was not something I anticipated. It was not something that was in my grant. But as well, I enjoyed Fairbanks the most, I would have to say. In Fairbanks, I learned about their gold rush history. I learned about Athabascan tribes through a tour I went on of an Athabascan village. So Fairbanks had the most opportunity, and even that 12-hour train ride, I was amazed and entertained the entire time with the beautiful scenery. And they had high school students who were narrating as we went on the train. And that's another thing that I was very impressed with Alaska, is their use of history and how they treat all of their native tribes. They have 5 native tribes there, and they're really a part of the culture, and Alaska has set up many opportunities for these people to share their culture, and for the younger generations to learn more about their culture and share it through like the train ride or the tour that I went on of the Athabascan village. That was, again, from a high school student. And as she was giving the tour, she said, well, I haven't done this stuff myself, but my ancestors did. And so she had learned more about her own culture as well, and was able to share that with us. And that was something else consistent that I saw throughout my trip in Alaska. After I was in Anchorage, I eventually did tour some of the coastal cities as well. And the entire time, the people were just wonderful, the natives of Alaska.
Let's shift a little bit and let's talk about now that you've returned and you've, how has your instruction changed? How has your instruction been enriched, would you say, as the result of your trip? Where do you get the opportunity to integrate this information, this knowledge that you gathered on your trip?
Well, I had some goals that were in my proposal before I went, and so I knew what to look for, and then there were so many other things that I just stumbled upon really while I was in Alaska, and so I've integrated those things as well. So the things that I anticipated learning about was the gold rush in Alaska, which in my opinion was much more difficult for the frontier settlers than it was in, let's say, California, just because of the geography. I mean, it really does require a different way of living, a whole different lifestyle. I mean, the winters are absolutely brutal. And I mean, you can just think about what it's like to be in 23 hours of darkness and what that does to even the biology of your brain and the chemicals in your brain. It really does affect how you need to live your life. And so that's going to be a part of the 9th grade course where that fits into the 9th grade frameworks, learning about the gold rush. And the students will be comparing the gold rush in California with the gold rush in Alaska. So I anticipated that in the 10th grade course. In the curriculum, we learn about how Alaska becomes a state, and I've already done that lesson, and the thing that I focused on for that was how Alaska has a myth that it's just a big icebox, and that's in fact what a lot of Americans thought when we bought it, and they kind of made fun of William Seward for really getting this purchase going, and they said it was Seward's folly. And so I showed my students pictures of Alaska in the summertime and said, does this look like a folly to you? Does this look like a mistake? And then we went into the natural resources that Alaska has to offer and the pipeline that has been built there. And students just absolutely loved that and had a lot of questions about what Alaska's really like. And I think a lot of them want to go there now at some point, whereas before they never would have thought that. Who wants to go to a really cold place? Right. And then, so I anticipated that. Something that came up unexpectedly, though, that I'm integrating right now actually into the 10th grade course as well, is about what happened to the Aleutian people. The Aleutians are a chain of islands along the southern coast of Alaska. And the Japanese actually invaded those islands in World War II. Not many people realize this. So technically, the Japanese did invade the United States. They invaded those islands. And those people were forced to move. And what the United States government did was they put them in internment camps that really didn't have a lot of medical care or supplies. And these people had a real terrible experience. And in the frameworks, it talks about Japanese-American internment, and so that's where I'm tying that in. But these were not people of Japanese descent. They were, Americans. And so I was able to purchase a video, and my students are watching that video and writing a diary entry from the perspective of an Aleutian. And really going into their journey, what their experience was like there, and what their experience was like afterwards. Now, if I had never been actually there in Alaska, I don't think I ever would have learned about it, really. I mean, these people even say clearly that it's not in Alaskan history books. So despite all the research that I had done, I wouldn't have known that if I didn't actually go there.
And obviously it's an example of how some people are treated and perhaps not a well-known. Another group of people who were displaced, and so it has such broad application to others, but again, something that perhaps we don't know much about in that particular case. You mentioned a little earlier that that there are some very different cultural aspects I'm sure that your students are quite surprised in hearing some of those.
Yes.
What are some of the
Yes.
things that they enjoy, kind of comparing their
Yes.
life to someone their age growing up in one of the villages or where you visited?
Well, first of all, not only students, but other people are surprised that I got a grant to go to Alaska because, again, it's like, well, what are you actually going to do in Alaska? And the main purpose was to study Alaskan Native cultures. And there are those 5 tribes that I told you about that are spread out across Alaska. And so, first of all, that's something that students aren't quite aware of, and it's very much different, again, than here in the continental United States. These native tribes have really kept their customs, and the Alaskan government has worked with them to try to enrich those things. But they still do lead a very sheltered life, where they're located far away from the rest of civilization or society. And so they really try to live off their land. And so they, fish during the summertime and preserve that. And the goal is to catch like a whale, and a whale would go ahead and feed an entire community for a year. So really, if they do something like that, and they use every single part of that whale. I mean, the way that they look at that is that animal, whatever it happens to be, is sacrificing their life for them. So they have spiritual ceremonies surrounded around how they prepare the whale and break it down, and they have all traditions that are associated with it, like the elders get the best part and then it trickles down, but they make sure that they use like every part of that whale out of respect to that whale. And that's something that you read about, like this was done a long time ago, but it still is being done in these remote communities in Alaska. Public education is very important in Alaska as well. And so that's where the government comes in and kind of tries to reach into these communities. And students there have to take a course in Alaskan history alongside American history. And a big part of that course is learning about all the 5 major tribes there in Alaska. And so in my World Religions and Cultures class, we're going to do a major unit on that towards the end of the year. And in my sociology class, we're just going to focus on one of those cultures, the Tlingit culture. And I knew I wanted to do that before I went in, but again, once I was there, I learned the most about the Tlingit culture, which I didn't anticipate. I just had a fabulous tour guide in Hoona, this little fishing village that I went to, and got so much information that I really have enough just to focus on that one culture in my sociology class. And so students there will be looking at norms and values and mores and folkways, and hopefully be able to make some of those connections you talked about from a teenager to a teenager. What is a teenager's life like in the Tlingit culture today? You might read it and think that it was 100 years ago, but no, this is what they're living like in Hoona.
So from your trip and from this experience, from what you've just said, there are a number of your courses that you've been able to take this information, integrate it, and from firsthand experience, which again, I think that must be so powerful as a teaching tool for the students at Wilmington High School.
In social studies in particular, we always teach about the value of primary sources. And I did a lot of research before I went there, and so many other things came up that I never really would have learned about. And hopefully my goal is, even though I just went to Alaska, my students will feel like they went too, or want to go and experience these things firsthand. So yeah, it really does go along with the idea of primary sources and how valuable they are.
Well, thank you very much for coming and spending time with us and sharing your trip and also what it's meant for your instruction. And thank you again very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the president of the Wilmington Educational Foundation, Jackie Raffi. Jackie also happens to be a parent of 2 5th graders in the Wilmington Public Schools. Jackie, welcome.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thanks for
It's
having me.
nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Jackie, what can you tell us about What can you tell the audience about the Wilmington Educational Foundation?
The Wilmington Educational Foundation is a great opportunity for us to support the school systems with funding innovative and creative programs that can't be sourced by the current year's school budget.
Okay, such as the Fund for Teachers.
That's right. There's actually several grant programs that we have. One is the Fund for Teachers. The others are, we have a school grant program which helps to support a particular school within the Wilmington School District. And the other one is the mini technology grants that we have that allow teachers to apply for monies to evaluate software and hardware that they'd like to use in their classrooms.
And I believe that announcement has just gone out to the teachers, the posting of the mini grants, and so that will be something that will be occurring. The award of the grants will be occurring in the not too distant future for this year.
That's right. We introduced this program last year, and the teachers were very excited by the opportunities, and some of the equipment and software programs are being used this year.
Okay. Tell me a little bit specifically. We heard about a trip to the Grand Canyon. We heard about a trip to Alaska. I believe in past years, the teachers, one went to Ireland, and I know another teacher traveled to some wonderful place.
Iceland.
Iceland.
That's right.
Tell me about the Educational Foundation's involvement, how they got started with this, and how the foundation views these opportunities.
2 years ago, then Assistant Superintendent Joanne Benton had applied for a grant from the Fund for Teachers organization. This organization is based in Houston, Texas, and it was started by a businessman, a very philanthropically minded businessman, who was so impacted in his younger years by his teachers that as he became more successful, he wanted to introduce a program that would support teachers' learning in an adventuresome way. So it was meant to be a program that would reward teachers for their passion and for their teaching abilities, and also it would allow them to bring back opportunities and experiences that they could then share in the classroom.
Being a member of the board, it was very exciting, certainly for me, but also I could tell by the reaction by other board members of the foundation when the two teachers, the teacher who traveled, Kristen, who traveled to the Grand Canyon, and Tracy, who traveled to Alaska, when they came and presented the information about their trips and what they were doing in their classrooms. I thought it was just a very powerful board meeting, and one where board members must have felt very proud about what they had done, their contribution to the Wilmington public schools, and in particular these two teachers.
There were two items that really struck me when I was hearing their presentations. The first was how much preparation and work they put into preparing for their trips, so they would really be able to bring back as much of their experience with source materials and just experiences to benefit their students. And the second was just how clearly they used the curriculum models to really guide how they were going to approach their trip. It was really just amazing to see and very inspiring. It's stories like those when we hear of the aspects of the Ed Foundation's efforts that really are impacting the quality of our teachers' experiences and our students' experiences that really makes the board members want to continue our efforts and double them. So
let's hear a little bit more about the board and how the Educational Foundation is governed.
We have a board of trustees. And all of the board members really come from very diverse backgrounds. We have a CPA, we have an engineer, we have a staff member within the school district. We have 2 attorneys and some people from other finance backgrounds. And really what the common goal that we all share is that we have such a passion for the quality of the public school system that we want to do what we can to help to improve it, to make a great system even better.
I've noticed that on the website, which we certainly can mention perhaps later on, I've noticed that during the past 2 years, the foundation has raised about $30,000. Could you talk a little bit about that and what the foundation is, how they've awarded that money?
Sure, yes. We have a mixture of public events in the past. We've had a few musical concerts for the public that have been great fundraisers. We also have a teacher tribute program where families can make a donation to the Ed Foundation and honor a teacher that has made a great impact on their students' educational experience. We have very generous business donors in the community that have provided us with grants. And what we do with that money then is that we have established some grant programs that will allow us to target several different areas within the school system. And the grant programs are announced to staff, and they have quite a bit of time to fill out the application. The applications are reviewed by members of the board and other specialists within the school system who actually know either about technology or some other facet of the grant program. And then the awards are made, and then we watch and see what great things develop.
Wonderful, wonderful. How about telling our audience about how people can find out more about the foundation and perhaps what's on the horizon for fundraisers in the way that they might participate?
Sure. Probably one of the more exciting recent aspects of the Ed Foundation is that we've recently re-released an updated website. That website address is www.wilmingtoneducationalfoundation.org. It's long, but it's worthwhile to go and see exactly what we've been able to accomplish in the past few years. And I would strongly urge people to go to that website. There's many opportunities to be involved on a volunteer basis, from little projects to large, fundraising efforts. And probably one of the things we're talking about doing is maybe in the fall having some kind of larger community event again. So more to come on that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you very much for all that the foundation does for the students of Wilmington, and it's a pleasure working with you and the board, and thank you very much for coming here today.
Thank you so much, Peter.
You're very welcome. Well, that's the end of our show. I hope that you've enjoyed listening to the teachers' experiences and how they've affected their teaching. And both Tracy and Kristen would like to offer some closing words themselves. Tracy?
I would just like to thank the Wilmington Educational Foundation Fund for Teachers for this amazing opportunity. I would not have been able to go to Alaska otherwise without the assistance of this grant, and I think it is an experience that I will keep throughout my life, and hopefully it has impacted my students as well.
I'd also like to thank the Wilmington Educational Fund for this opportunity to allow me to travel to the Grand Canyon. The grant writing was an opportunity that I took advantage of, and I would suggest to all my colleagues to also take opportunities from the Wilmington Educational Fund. And I would like to thank the community for giving to the Wilmington Educational Fund in order to make our trips possible. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the show.
As a preview of our next show, I thought it would be interesting to many of Wilmington's residents to hear and learn more about some of those, or hear from some of those people who are responsible for the youngest students in Wilmington schools, those 3, 4, 5, and 6-year-olds, those students who come to our schools for the first time. Many parents of young children are quite interested in how they should prepare their children for school, what they can expect in those first years of school. So we'll talk to people who are most familiar with Wilmington's pre-kindergarten and its kindergarten programs. We'll balance that with including people who are responsible for Wilmington students as they exit from grade 12 chairman of the guidance department, will be with us to talk about what's most important for parents to be thinking about as youngsters work their way through the school district and the school and the grades of the school district to the point at which they leave the Wilmington Public Schools. How should they best prepare for what's after the grade 12? So I look forward to that. I also ask you to please consider emailing me at the address on the screen your questions so that I might respond to those in our next program. So again, I appreciate your viewing In the Loop and hope that it provides a service to you, and so long till next time. Thank you.